I never thought the greatest betrayal of my life would come from my own daughter. It was a chilly autumn night when I overheard her voice echoing through the living room. "If Mom signs the papers, the house is ours. She won't even notice." My heart stopped. My daughter, my flesh and blood, conspiring with her husband to take everything I had built with my late husband. In that instant, memories of raising her alone, sacrificing my health and comfort so she could have a better life, came rushing back like shards of broken glass. And now this, my own child plotting to strip me of the very roof over my head? I wanted to scream, to collapse, to ask why. But instead, I stayed silent. Because in that moment, I made a promise to myself. They think I'm weak, but I'll show them just how wrong they are. My name is Helen Parker. I'm 67 years old, a retired school librarian, and a widow of almost 5 years. My husband, Frank, passed away after a long and grueling battle with cancer. He was my partner in everything, the man who taught me patience, who made me laugh even on the darkest days, and who stood beside me as we built our lives brick by brick. Together, we created a modest but comfortable existence, our cozy suburban home, our careful savings, and above all, a family we cherished more than anything else. I had 2 children. My son, Matthew, lives in Ohio with his wife and their 2 little boys. He has always been steady, dependable, and perhaps too much like his father, quiet in nature, serious in work. And then there was Rachel, my daughter, who always seemed to shine a little brighter. She was ambitious, outspoken, and had a taste for finer things. She married a man named Ethan, a man I never fully trusted, though his charming smile often convinced those around him. When Frank passed, my world fell into pieces. I had never known such emptiness, and the loneliness threatened to swallow me whole. It was Rachel who stepped in, insisting that I move closer to her so she could look after me. She told me it was what family did for each other, and I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that even though my partner was gone, I was still needed, still loved. So I packed up the house Frank and I had shared for 30 years. I tucked away his favorite chair, boxed up the photo albums, and left behind the echoes of our laughter in those old walls. I told myself this was a new chapter, an opportunity to be near my daughter and my granddaughter Lily, who was barely 5 years old at the time. At first, it felt like a blessing. I had Sunday dinners at their house, where Lily would climb into my lap with her sticky fingers and sweet giggles. Rachel would pour me a glass of wine, and Ethan would boast about his business ventures. There was warmth in those early days, a fragile sense of belonging that helped me fill the silence Frank had left behind. I even gave them $15,000 from my savings when they mentioned struggling with their mortgage. It felt natural to help. After all, they were my family. Rachel kissed my cheek and called me her guardian angel. For a little while, I believed I was doing the right thing. But then, things began to shift. Subtle at first. Ethan's smile, once disarming, began to feel more like a sneer. His jokes carried an edge, and his compliments turned hollow. Rachel's tone grew sharper, her words clipped, as though my presence had become a burden. The warmth of those Sunday dinners began to fade, replaced by cold silences and conversations that ended the moment I entered the room. I started to wonder if I had given too much of myself away, too much trust, too much money, too much hope. And in the quiet hours of the night, I sometimes asked myself a painful question. Had my daughter invited me closer to her heart, or closer to her plans? The days that followed only confirmed what my gut already knew. Rachel and Ethan weren't looking after me. They were circling me, like vultures waiting for the right moment to pick apart what was left of my life. One evening, I overheard them arguing in the kitchen. Their voices were hushed, but the walls in that house carried every secret. "She'll sign eventually," Ethan muttered, his voice sharp. "And if she doesn't?" Rachel snapped back. Ethan laughed bitterly. "Then we make her. She's old, forgetful. No one's going to believe her over us." The words sliced through me like glass. My daughter, the little girl I once rocked to sleep, the young woman I stayed up late tutoring through college, was speaking of me as if I were a burden, an obstacle to be removed. I pressed my hand against my chest, struggling to breathe. Betrayal doesn't come all at once. It comes in quiet waves, and that night, it drowned me. The next morning, Rachel set a cup of coffee in front of me, her smile sugary sweet. "Mom, you really should think about signing those papers. It's for your own good. We'll make sure Lily has the best future." Her words were rehearsed, too polished, and I knew she had practiced them in the mirror. I wanted to scream, to throw the coffee back in her face, but instead I forced a smile and nodded. "I'll think about it." Inside, I was burning. Things grew worse after that. My allowance money, the little cash I kept in an envelope for groceries, started disappearing. When I asked Rachel about it, she sighed dramatically. "Mom, you probably misplaced it. You really should keep better track." But I knew better. Ethan's new watch, Rachel's new shoes. The missing money wasn't lost. It was stolen. One afternoon, I went to pick up Lily from school. She hugged me tight, her little arms wrapping around my waist, and whispered, "Grandma, Daddy says when the house is ours, we'll have a pool." I froze. A pool. My granddaughter had no idea what she was saying, but it confirmed everything. They weren't just trying to take care of me, they were planning to take everything Frank and I had worked for. That night, I sat in my room with Frank's old journal in my lap. His handwriting was messy, filled with notes about bills, savings, and dreams we once had. Tears blurred my vision. "Frank," I whispered, "our daughter has turned against me. Against us. What did I do wrong?" But grief slowly hardened into something else. Anger. Resolve. They thought I was weak. They thought age had dulled my senses, that grief had made me blind. But they had forgotten. I was Frank's partner through every struggle, every sacrifice. And I had a strength they could never imagine. That was the night I decided, if they wanted a fight for this house, for my dignity, for my very name, then a fight they would get. From that night, I began my silent war. I hid away my bank documents, gathered every piece of mail in my name, and locked them in a small fireproof box. Then, I bought a tiny voice recorder online. I placed it in the living room, where Rachel and Ethan did most of their scheming. Within a week, I had recordings, Ethan calling me an old fool, Rachel mocking me as a burden, and worse, them planning how to sell my house once the papers were signed. Every word felt like a dagger, but instead of breaking me, it sharpened my resolve. But fate handed me something even bigger. Out of desperation, I called Rachel's mother-in-law, Ethan's estranged mom, Linda. To my shock, she confessed Ethan had done something similar years ago, manipulated an elderly aunt into signing away her savings. My anger turned into icy determination. With Linda's help, I hired a lawyer specializing in elder fraud. Together, we built a case, layer by layer. But I didn't just want legal justice. I wanted them to feel the sting of humiliation. So, I played the long game. Around Rachel and Ethan, I acted fragile, confused, and compliant. I let them believe they were winning. If Rachel asked me about the paperwork, I would sigh, rub my temples, and say, "I'll sign it soon, dear." Ethan would smirk like a vulture circling prey. They never suspected I was recording every exchange, documenting every scheme. Meanwhile, Linda provided me with old bank records and testimonies of Ethan's past schemes. My lawyer told me we were building not just a defense, but a weapon that could destroy them both. Still, I knew the legal system alone wasn't enough. People like Ethan thrive in the shadows, manipulating quietly. If justice came only through courtrooms, they'd wriggle out with excuses and charm. No, I needed the world to see who they really were. That's when I devised my second front, exposure. With the help of my lawyer, I arranged a notary appointment. Rachel and Ethan thought it was to finalize the transfer of my house. What they didn't know was that I had tipped off the authorities, who were already investigating Ethan for financial misconduct. At the same time, I asked Linda to invite a few family friends over, people Rachel desperately wanted to impress. The trap was set. In the days leading up to the appointment, I kept my act flawless. I cooked dinner for them, smiled at Lily, even thanked Ethan for taking care of me. Rachel, smug in her victory, didn't notice that I spent my nights quietly rehearsing what I would say when the moment came. Because this wasn't just about keeping my house anymore. This was about reclaiming my dignity. About showing my daughter and her husband that betrayal has a cost. And when that cost came due, they wouldn't just lose everything they had plotted to steal, they would lose the illusion of control forever. I played the part of the fragile widow perfectly. Forgetting my keys, asking Rachel to repeat herself, nodding absent-mindedly, just enough for her to believe her own lies about my weakness. Every sigh, every blank stare was a thread in the trap I was weaving, and she never saw the web forming around her. Then came the night of their final push. They sat me down at the dining table, papers in hand, smugness radiating from every glance. Rachel placed the documents in front of me as if she were presenting a gift, not a death sentence for my independence. "Mom, just sign this," Rachel coaxed, her voice sugar-coated poison. "You'll thank us later," Ethan added with a smirk. "This house will finally be put to good use instead of rotting under your care." I smiled faintly, my heart pounding so loud I thought they might hear it. "All right, but maybe we should record this conversation, just so I remember what I agreed to." They exchanged amused glances, their arrogance overflowing. "Go ahead, Mom," Rachel said with a smirk. "We've got nothing to hide." But what they didn't know was that my lawyer and Linda were already listening on speakerphone in the next room. Every word was being captured, every vile intention preserved. As the tape rolled, Ethan leaned back confidently and said the words that sealed his fate. "Once she signs, we can flip the house. She won't even know what hit her." I felt something inside me harden. The fear that had kept me quiet for weeks dissolved, replaced by fire. I stood up suddenly, my chair screeching against the floor. My hands no longer trembled. "You're right," I said calmly, my voice steadier than it had been in months. "I won't sign. And now I won't have to." Their smug expressions faltered. Before they could react, I pressed play on the recorder. Their own voices filled the room, echoing like a death knell. Ethan's arrogance cracked into shock. Rachel's face drained of color as she realized the noose tightening around her neck. "You recorded us?" Rachel hissed, her voice shrill with panic. "No," I corrected, my gaze burning into hers. "I exposed you." Ethan lunged for the recorder, but I stepped back, holding it high. "One move closer and this goes straight to the police." In fact, I tilted my head toward the hallway. "They've already heard everything." Linda and my lawyer stepped into the room at that exact moment, their presence like a gavel slamming down in court. Linda's eyes, usually warm, were hard as stone as she glared at her son. My lawyer's calm voice broke the stunned silence. "Mr. Whitmore, Mrs. Whitmore, this is attempted elder fraud. We already have enough evidence to press charges. Tonight only confirmed it." Rachel's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "Mom, please, you don't understand. We were just—" "Just what?" I snapped, the years of swallowed hurt boiling to the surface. "Stealing from me, mocking me behind my back, planning to throw me out of my own home." Tears burned in my eyes, but they were not of weakness. They were born of fury and release. For the first time, I looked my daughter in the eye without flinching. "I gave you life, Rachel. And this is what you do with it. Plot against your own mother." Rachel's lips trembled, but no words came. Ethan tried to bluster, muttering about misunderstandings, but his voice cracked under the weight of his own guilt. I straightened my shoulders, taller than I had felt in years. "No more. You thought I was weak, that I'd bow my head and obey. But tonight, the game ends." They sat frozen, stripped of their arrogance, their empire of lies crumbling before their eyes. And for the first time in a long while I felt powerful, because the truth, spoken aloud, was the sharpest weapon of all. Thanksgiving was supposed to be a time of gratitude, laughter, and shared memories. But for Rachel and Ethan, it became a reckoning. I had prepared the table with care, turkey golden brown, pies cooling on the counter, candles flickering in the dim light. Family members gathered with chatter and warmth, unaware of the storm about to break. Rachel strutted in with that superior air she'd worn ever since Ethan latched onto her. Ethan followed, slick smile plastered on his face, already pouring himself wine as if he owned the house. When everyone had settled, I stood at the head of the table. My hands rested on the back of Frank's old chair, and for a moment I felt his presence steady me. "Before we eat," I began softly, "I'd like to share something." The room fell silent. Rachel shot me a puzzled glance, but her smirk never left. Ethan leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. I pulled a small speaker from my cardigan pocket and pressed play. The first voice that filled the room was Ethan's. "Once she signs, we can flip the house. She won't even know what hit her." Then Rachel's laughter followed, sharp and cruel. "She's too old to notice. She's basically handing it over." Gasps rippled around the table. Forks clattered. Cousins stared wide-eyed. Neighbors whispered. Linda, Ethan's mother, pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. "My God!" she whispered. Rachel shot up from her chair, her face crimson. "Mom, stop this. Turn it off," she shrieked. But the tape kept playing, Ethan calling me an old fool, Rachel mocking me as a burden. Their own words condemned them. Ethan lunged forward, but Matthew, my eldest, grabbed his arm and yanked him back with fury I hadn't seen since he was a boy. "Sit down," Matthew growled. Rachel's facade cracked. "Mom, please, this isn't what it sounds like." But the room wasn't buying it. Every lie they had spun unraveled in real time. I looked directly at her, my voice steady, unshaken. "It sounds exactly like what it is, betrayal." Silence hung heavy, only broken by Linda's choked sob. She looked at her son with a mixture of grief and shame. "I warned you," she whispered, shaking her head. By the following week, my lawyer filed charges. Ethan, already under suspicion for similar crimes, faced criminal investigation for elder fraud. The evidence was irrefutable. His own voice, his own schemes, laid bare. Rachel wasn't spared either. The court summoned her for her role in the conspiracy. I sat in the courtroom, spine straight, heart calm. When the recordings were played for the judge, Rachel broke down in tears. She looked at me desperately, mascara streaking her cheeks. "Mom, please. I didn't mean it." I met her eyes, steady and cold. "You meant every word, Rachel. And now so do I." The gavel struck like thunder. Ethan was sentenced to time in jail for his fraud, his record stained forever. Rachel was ordered to repay every dollar she had taken and sentenced to mandatory counseling for manipulative behavior. For once, the arrogant glimmer in Ethan's eyes was gone. He was led away in handcuffs, cursing under his breath. Rachel, pale and broken, couldn't even lift her head to look at me. Around me, family and neighbors whispered words of support. Linda, through tears, took my hand. "Thank you for ending this cycle," she said quietly. As I walked out of the courthouse, the crisp winter air filled my lungs. For months I had carried the weight of their deceit, their cruelty. Now the weight was gone. The daughter who thought she could strip me of everything was left with nothing but shame. And I, the frail widow they had underestimated, stood stronger than ever. The months that followed felt like walking through the ashes of a fire I hadn't started, but one I had survived. Every headline in the local paper reminded me of the scandal. Elder fraud exposed. Daughter and son-in-law caught in scheme. My name was whispered in grocery aisles, at church, even at the post office. Some pitied me, others admired me, but for once, no one dismissed me as weak. Rachel disappeared from my life for a time. She filed for divorce from Ethan, a man whose loyalty dissolved as quickly as the ink on their marriage certificate. She learned what I already knew, that betrayal leaves nothing but ruins behind. Her friends abandoned her, the lavish lifestyle she clung to evaporated, and she had to move into a small apartment on the edge of town. I did not gloat. I simply let the weight of her choices rest where they belonged, on her own shoulders. As for Ethan, prison became his new reality. The arrogance that once dripped from every word was replaced with silence. Linda visited me one Sunday after church, tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry it took your pain for my son to finally face consequences," she whispered. I hugged her, because I knew she carried her own shame. It wasn't her fault her son had turned greed into a way of life. Meanwhile, I chose to let go of the house, not out of defeat, but out of freedom. The memories of Frank and me raising our children there would always live in my heart, but the walls had absorbed too much bitterness. I sold it on my own terms and bought a little cottage near Matthew's family. It was painted white with blue shutters and had a garden just big enough for roses and lavender. Every morning, I sipped tea on the porch, the sun rising without the shadow of fear behind it. My granddaughter Lily visits almost every weekend. She's only 8, but she's wise beyond her years. She once climbed into my lap and said, "Grandma, you're the strongest person I know." I kissed her forehead, tears welling in my eyes. She'll never know how much those words healed me more than any court ruling ever could. Rachel eventually reached out. One shaky phone call late at night. "Mom, I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want to change. For Lily." Her voice was raw, stripped of arrogance. I didn't answer right away, because forgiveness isn't instant. It's a journey. But I told her this: I won't close the door on you. It's up to you to walk through it. Now, when I look in the mirror, I no longer see the frail widow they tried to exploit. I see a woman who stood up when it mattered most. I see resilience stitched into every wrinkle, strength in every breath. I am Helen Parker, a mother, a survivor, a woman underestimated, but never defeated. Helen's journey reminds us that strength is not measured by wealth, power, or appearances. It is measured by resilience, dignity, and the courage to stand tall when others try to break you. Too often, the people closest to us underestimate us, or worse, betray us. But like Helen, we are never truly powerless. The truth has a way of surfacing, and justice finds its mark, sometimes in the courtroom, sometimes in the quiet victory of reclaiming your life. If this story touched you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who might need the reminder that even in the face of betrayal, hope and justice are possible. And if you believe in stories that expose cruelty but celebrate resilience, make sure to subscribe, leave a like, and join us for more tales of courage, revenge, and redemption.